Well, friends, this morning we're going to continue in our sermon series about living united. And it's an important time for us as a church to frankly just talk about what it means to be united. United in faith, united as a church in the midst of a crazy pandemic, in the midst of kind of turmoil inside of the church, inside of the world. And so today we're going to talk about what does it mean to live united. Now, last week we talked about kind of missional objective and the purpose of the church. What is the purpose of us? Why would we even be united? This week we're going to kind of talk about the underpinning underneath that. How do you stay united? How do you continue in faith, hope, and love one with another? And how do we journey forward as a church? Now, over my 4 years of being here at Broad Street, I've shared a lot of stories about myself, but probably the most formational one about who I am, especially that took place during my childhood, I haven't shared with you yet, and I thought maybe today would be a good time to tell you that story. When I was in the 6th grade, my mom started getting nervous about me. She was concerned because the only thing it seemed that I cared about at all was sports. I wanted to play basketball. I wanted to play baseball. I even wanted to play football when I was in the 6th grade. So I tried out for every team. I played every sport that I could possibly get. But one afternoon, my mom sat me down and she said, Micah, there are other things inside of this world other than sports. And she said, if you're going to play on one more sports team, you're going to do something that rounds you out as a human being. And she had prepared a list. And I started reading these things that were on the list, and as a 6th grade boy, none of them seemed to appeal to me at all. I went down the list, and I can't even tell you all of them today, but she wanted me to take a sewing class. She had wanted me to join a show choir. She wanted me to do all of these things, and none of them were me. They're great things and wonderful things. They just weren't me. I got down to the end of the list, and she had the Square D's dance troupe. I thought, okay. You know, there's probably some girls there, hang out with some girls, dance a little bit. That might not be bad. It met on Thursday nights from it was from 5:30 to 7:30. You know, practices were over by then. I could go from practice to the dance, wherever the club was, wherever that was going to be, and we could kind of get our groove on a couple of hours. That might not be bad. I could be rounded out like that. So we went on that first Thursday to the Square D's dance jam. And it turned out as we entered into the room, my mom hadn't really kind of informed me that the Square D's was a square dancing troupe. And that I had now officially joined a square dancing troupe. She also didn't tell me that everyone else in the Square D's was over the age of 70. And so here I was as a 6th grader with 25 other wonderful people who were maybe 7 decades older than I was. And there was my dance partner, Gladys. Now, don't get me wrong. Gladys was a gentle woman. She was a wonderful person. And she taught me how to do-si-do. She taught me how to pass down the line, you know. I learned this dance move. I think they called it alamander left or something like that. As I always said, let's salamander now. But I learned all of the dance moves, and Gladys was wonderful. I was actually a part of the Square D's for 3 years. Now, you may not realize this, but the Square D's, they're renowned in Great Falls, Montana. I don't know if that's kind of hit here in East Tennessee yet. Have you heard of them or not? Probably watched them on the YouTube some. But I had just finally, after 3 years of practice, I had gotten to that place where I was ready to dance professionally. Let's just be honest, out in public, and was ready to go kind of on the first. And then all of a sudden, something happened in 8th grade. And I just told Mom I didn't want to square dance anymore. And for some reason, my mom let me quit the square dancing troupe. I want to tell you the truth. In 8th grade, I was so relieved that I didn't have to go to square dancing anymore. But when I left that square dancing troupe, there was something missing. And as an 8th grader, I didn't necessarily get it. Now as a 50-year-old man looking back, I get it. There was a room full of about 25 or 30 grandmas and grandpas. that had taken me in and loved me well. Like for 3 years, I'd show up on Thursday nights to the school, and man, they would encourage me. They'd love on me. They'd hug on me. You know, everybody'd always have a little root beer barrel. You know how they'd always have a root beer barrel somehow in their pocket. Some of them still had wrappers on them. Some of them didn't. Those were gross, but they just loved me well. When I got to high school, there's a part of me that wished I had still been part of that Square D's. I remember bumping in some pretty difficult times in high school. I remember when I had rejection or when I had failed or I had just a catastrophic mistake. How great it would have been just to run back into that Square D room. Just have all these grandmas and grandpas loving on me, encourage me, even in the midst of where unbelievable rejection was taking place. It was this pool of wonderful people that loved me well. But I quit it. I just stopped. And the truth about my life is you can take the Square D's and you can add it to a giant list of Micah's life. And that list would be titled, Things That I Quit, Things That I Didn't Finish, or Things That I Ran Away From. Because it took too long, it was too hard, or I never thought I'd be able to accomplish it. And friends, in my life, that list is monstrous. And what's really sad for me today is to look back at that list of things that I quit, that I gave up on, or that I ran away from because they were too hard or it took too much effort. And every single thing on that list is stuff that looking at it today, I wish I would have accomplished. I wish I would have seen it through. I wish I would have been there in the end to benefit the harvest of all of the work that had been done in the soil. But instead I left. This morning, I think I want to talk to you about your spiritual journey and my spiritual journey, our shared spiritual journey. What scares me a little bit about the postmodern church today is that I think a lot of us could probably add intentional spiritual journey to that list as well. The truth is, a lot of us come to this person and work of Christ and we experience the gift and joy of salvation. For some of us, it happened very early in life. Maybe it was at a vacation Bible school or a youth camp. Some of us, it happened in college. Some of us, it happened a little bit later in life. And we had this super hot fire, this spiritual coal that was burning inside of our heart. And then we went head first into it. And we started a little bit of study and a little bit of prayer. Maybe we joined a Bible study. Maybe we joined up with kind of a ministry where we were doing service and action and being the hands and feet of Christ. Maybe even some of us, maybe even experimented with first fruit giving or tithing. And we said, we're going to commit to this. We're going to try it. But the journey got way too hard. The work became way more difficult than what we had expected. We thought that it was just going to be sing Kumbaya along a fireplace and everybody was going to bring s'mores. But instead, it took work. And so we walked away. We said, I'm not walking away from God. I still love God. I still believe Jesus saved me. But the journey, this vibrant spiritual life, I'm just going to put it on that list of things that I ran away from, things that are too hard, things that I'm not going to accomplish. This morning, my hope is simply this, to rekindle the flame wherever you're at, to stoke the fires of you that are deep into a spiritual journey. But for those of you that kindle is just basically left down to this tiniest little coal, I just want to blow on it today. I want to look at Proverbs chapter 16 briefly with you this morning. And we're only going to look at 3 verses. Proverbs chapter 16, Proverbs is this big book of wise sayings and really smart stuff that, quite frankly, if you were to just sit there and read this with your middle school, high school children, your elementary children, if you were to read it as husband and wife, if you were going to, frankly, read it in your offices as co-workers, one with another, if you were going to read it in your schools as teachers and co-workers, there's so much wisdom that just pours out of this book. But I want to look at 16, 1 through 3 real briefly with you this morning. Verse 1 says, we can make our own plans, but the Lord gives the right answer. People may be pure in their own eyes, but the Lord examines their motives. Commit your actions to the Lord, and your plans will succeed. Now, these 3 verses create kind of a hermeneutic wheel, or a kind of a revolving circle, if you will. And if you'll notice, verse 1 starts with your plans, and verse 3 ends with your plans. But there is a massive transformation from 1 to 3. We each have plans. We each have hopes and dreams and expectations in this life. Every day, quite frankly, we wake up and we set off with our plans. But often our plans are a complete train wreck. What I love about this circle is simply this. I'm going to just give it away to you. Here's the point. The author of this proverb says, you have plans in life, but God's got the right answers. And if you can take your plans in life and simply push them right into the person and work of Jesus Christ through the power of the Holy Spirit, honoring God the Father, He's going to pour out any of that stuff that's not of Him. He's going to press out and refine anything that doesn't need to be a part of your plans, because He's got the right answers. And these places where you have mixed motives, where you kind of have a double-edged agenda or a triple-edged agenda, when you press it into that rubric and the fire of who the Lord is, He's going to press all that out. And the outcome, the outpouring in the end is going to be your plan, but it's been perfected by the Lord. And then, once your plan lines up with God's plan, once you kind of get this right alignment with who God is, all of a sudden, you're going to start to see success, because your plan becomes kingdom-oriented, not self-oriented. And all of a sudden, you're going to see the kingdom coming on earth as it is in heaven. Maybe not in perfection, maybe not completely, but you're going to see small little inbreakings of the kingdom of God breaking out all over the place. Now, let me break that down in Micah language. Because the truth is, we all have plans. Where do plans start with? Well, I believe that life is a series of choices and actions. I want to say this slowly. I believe life is a series of choices and actions that are built off of a system of beliefs and influences. Now, this is important. I really want to work through this with you this morning. Life is choices and actions that are done or chosen or acted upon with this foundational structure under it. So what we think and what we do, how we act, how we live, how we behave, is based off of, I think, 2 foundational pieces. 1 is our belief system, and 2 is any influences in our life. Our belief system is inherently inward. It's what's inside of us. It's our moral fabric. It's our makeup. It's who we are. The influence are absolutely outside sources that speak into our life. Let's start with beliefs. Our beliefs are that core that are inside of us. And hopefully that we get to the place in life where our beliefs become bedrock. Like that giant Panamanian limestone that we've talked about in the past, that sure and strong foundation that cannot be moved. And how do we build these beliefs? Well, I believe our beliefs are built in a very intentional way. They're built through worship. Do you know that worship, there's a Greek word in the New Testament that's used for worship, and it simply means to breathe, or there's a instance or a nuance as worship is actually being so close to God that you breathe the very exhale of God. Your belief system literally is connected to the amount of time, the quality of worship that you spend with God. I think that happens on Sunday morning, and wish we were all here together today. But it's not just Sunday morning. Worship is a 24/7 practice. It's when you're in your car acknowledging God. It's when you're at work acknowledging God. It's when you're doing your homework. It's when you're playing. It's just that constant. It's not sitting in a pew, sitting in a chair, necessarily singing a song or reading a litany. It's literally just being in the presence of God. Worship is breathing, exhaling, receiving God. And here's the struggle. A lot of us don't do it very often. Or it's so haphazard, or it's so situational that it doesn't become part of a bedrock foundation for us. It becomes some kind of tangential piece that's over here on the side. And so when it comes to our core beliefs, the foundation of who we are, breathing the breath of God, being so close in proximity to God, isn't necessarily a part of our bedrock belief system. It's something that we have to kind of quick try and draw on once in a while. Belief is built in the presence of God. Belief is built in the midst of prayer, in the midst of study. Belief is built in the midst of being in the presence of God and communing with Him. I was thinking about Sabbath the other day. You read the creation story, and there's a lot of debate about science versus the Bible versus the science, And sometimes I think we get so hung up in that creation story, and we want to get on an edge and fight about, was it 24 hours, or was this, is science, carbon dating, blah, 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 blah. We get so hung up on this stuff that we miss some other important narratives inside of the creation story. For 6 days, God created this universe, the world, everything. And then it says on the seventh day, He did what? What did He do on the seventh day? He rested, right? He took Sabbath. When Jesus came years later, He talked about Sabbath, and He said, humanity wasn't created for the Sabbath. Sabbath was created for humanity. Part of who we are in that whole belief system, deep down inside of us, is this practice of Sabbath keeping. Can you imagine what that seventh day of creation was like when God rested and experienced all of the work that was out in front of Him, and rejoiced and had restoration and all of this healing that was going on all over the place, probably ministering. I don't know what happened that day. Ministering angels coming. The Bible says that angels will come. And so the point is, here's God who knows that He probably doesn't need Sabbath. He's God. And yet, He's going to give a template or a model for humanity. Jesus affirms it in the New Testament. I don't know how people go without Sabbath. Well, I know what happens in my life when I go without Sabbath. It absolutely tears at the bedrock of my belief system. My soul gets dark. I get angry and frustrated, tension, stress. It just builds up inside of me. My attitudes get sharp. I become bitey. I become angry. And all of a sudden, this bedrock, which is supposed to be who I am at the very core, so that my choices and actions can be built on my belief system, that rubric which is supposed to lead me as my plans move into God's plans, absolutely crumbles and falls apart. Here's really what I want to hear. I want you to hear this one. Your belief system matters. And if you aren't an intentional disciple of your belief system, there is going to be cracks in your foundation. And man, when the storms come, that is a really uncomfortable place to be. Okay, now come back. Choices and actions based on, right? Life is a series of choices and actions based on beliefs and influences. We've talked about beliefs, let's talk about influences now. Influences, well, beliefs are all of that inward stuff. Influences are all of that outside stuff. What you watch, what you consume, what you take in, what you ingest, what you eat. All of those things that we want to have part of us, emotional stuff, relational stuff, all of that stuff. And it's important because we give standing in our life to the outside influences. Whether we want to believe it or not, we give standing. And frankly, some of us give a whole lot of standing to outside influences. It can impact our moods. It can impact our relationships. It can impact our finances. It can impact our relationships. All of that impacted by outside influences. School, work, play, sports, leisure, all of that. Now, here's the problem. We're talking about two foundational pieces that impact our choices and our actions. Now watch what happens. When your influences and your beliefs are at discord with one another, when they are not in alignment with it, when they are out of sync one with another, all of a sudden, the soul, the heart, and the core of any human being is at risk. You want to find out where you're sitting with beliefs and with influences? Just wait for that super difficult choice in life. When the fork in the road comes and it's either right or left, and then see how you address that fork in the road. Are your beliefs and influences lined up? Or is there some real discernment and alignment in the midst of that? Or is it a tug of war inside your soul? That's that saying, the dark night of the soul, right? When you wake up in a cold sweat at 2 a.m. and you can't get back to sleep because your mind is racing and your heart and your soul is telling you one thing, but everything else inside of you, your feelings and your emotions are pulling you another way. There's a core alignment that's out of line. You know where it becomes really dangerous for us? Is when that fork in the road comes and we know that one's wrong. We know. And we know that this one's right. But we don't want to just say goodbye to that fork yet. So what do? We kind of blaze a path somewhere in the middle, right? Because our alignment isn't 100%. We're at war with ourself and our own soul. Our influences and our beliefs are at tangentially opposed to each other. So we kind of get off onto this little pathway. We kind of try and blaze a trail, knowing that that's where we ultimately want to come out, but we don't want to say goodbye or get too far distanced from this over here. And friends, I'm telling you, it is a disaster, a pitfall waiting to happen. Now, here's the challenge, right? We say, well, in life, is there really a right and wrong? Or can we all just kind of have our own truth? And is the middle path okay sometimes? Or is even the far right path, is that okay sometimes? But I want to tell you, there is right and there is wrong. There is cosmological truth that has been true from the beginning of time. And if you are a follower of God, if you believe that it was He who spoke and out of nothing the world was formed, and if you believe that He is the one who then leads, heals, protects, guides, and provides, then you would certainly believe that according to God, there is a right and there is a wrong. Now, I'm not going to pick apart and tell you, well, this is right, this is wrong, this is right, this is wrong, because guess what? It is not up to me to make a choice about what is right and wrong. That's not my decision to make. But when Proverbs 1 says, take your plans, and God is the one who knows what is right, he has the right answer. He sees your mixed motives. Let him purify that. Let him speak into that belief, and let all those outside influences line up with what the core value, the core belief of a follower of Christ should be. Then you're going to come out in a place where your plans are successful because they're kingdom-oriented. Listen to what C.S. Lewis said in this book, Mere Christianity, about right and wrong. He said, the first thing to get clear about Christian morality between humanity is that in this department, Christ did not come to preach any brand new morality. Listen very carefully. The golden rule of the New Testament, do as you would be done by, is a summing up of what everyone at bottom had always known to be right. Really great moral teachers never do introduce new moralities. It's quacks and cranks who do that. As Dr. Johnson said, people need to be reminded more often than they need to be instructed. Hear that? People need to be reminded. They need to be brought back to instead of having some sort of new unveiling. The real job of every moral teacher is to keep on bringing us back time after time. The old simple principles which are also anxious not to see, like bringing a horse back to the fence that it refused to jump, or bringing a child back to the lesson that it wants to shirk away from. You see, this whole idea of this discipleship of Christ is not some sort of new principle that flies in the face of every other morality that exists in the world. It is the morality. It is the right and wrong. It is the cosmological makeup of the universe. And what are those words? Integrity, love, forgiveness, hope, grace, justice, truth, mercy. Who doesn't want that? Who in this world is wanting something that's totally different and chaotic from that? So here's the point. If life is a series of choices and actions based on our belief system and the influences of our life, and we struggle because we do have mixed motives. And so we go out and make these choices, just bombarded by influences. How in the world can we be practical disciples and train ourselves like an athlete would train for a race to get to the place where we're living inside of this wheel of our plans intersecting with the will of God, bringing forth purity for the sake of the hope of the kingdom of God? I want to call your attention to our church's mission statement. I hope you know it, but if you don't, our mission statement is simply this. Broad Street United Methodist Church exists to glorify God through our worship, our study, our gifts, our service, and our witness, so that all may know God's love through Jesus Christ. In essence, these are the 5 pillars of Broad Street: worship, study, service, giving, and witnessing. Much like any athlete would come forth and train, much like anyone would come out and learn how to develop who they are, we as disciples have to get back to that big, long list of things that we've run away from, things that we stopped doing because they were too hard, and get back into the true form of discipleship. Do you really want to see a true revolution in this world today? Do you really want to see a transformation of humanity, of this earth, of the climate, of the way that we treat each other, of social justice? Do you really want to see a revolution? It's going to come when the church starts living the way that it should. And I make you this promise. When we, myself at the head of the list, start living with love as an everyday action. When we start forgiving others as we have been forgiven. When we start acting the way we should act, myself at the head of the list, do you think the world will not change? The last thing the world needs is a bunch of Christians who claim the name of Christ but act completely different 6 days of the week. And the only way that our choices and our actions are really going to be transformed is by getting our beliefs, our inside worked out right. Through worship, study, through giving, through serving, through witnessing. And then allowing our influences to align one with another. And then going forth into the world. Not perfect, but working for perfection. Saying goodbye to that which is behind us. Saying no more give up lists. I'm all in. I want to introduce you to a guy, and if you have to forgive me, I'm going to do the very best that I can right now. Here's his name. Hernan Cortez de Monroy. Nope, I did it wrong again. I'll start over again. They're all making fun of me right over here because I've been practicing. Hernan Cortez de Monroy y Pizarro Altamirano, primero Marquis of the Valley of Oaxaca. Oaxaca. Thank you. Of the Valley of Oaxaca. Could you imagine in first grade having to write that title on your paper? Amen? Anyways, people know him as Hernan Cortez. In 1519, he left Spain. He was one of the Spanish conquistadors. And he came to Mexico. They came on ships across the Atlantic Ocean. He had 600 men with him. And his whole desire, the whole purpose of his coming to Mexico was to bring an end to the Aztec Empire and let the Spanish influence cut loose in Central America. Now, their journey across the Atlantic Ocean was tumultuous. Many times they thought their ships were going to sink. They thought they were all going to die. When they finally landed in Mexico, Cortez stood up and he said to his lead generals, he said, now grab all of the men and go back and burn the ships. Why? Because he knew what was in front of him was even a greater battle than what he had just been through. And if those ships were parked on the shore, those 600 men might step into a little bit of oppression, a little bit of difficulty, and say, this is too hard, I'm going back, and get on the boats and leave. When Cortez said, that's it, burn the boats, he made a commitment to stay. You know, I think too often today, we're really, really vested in discovering or finding out or planning our exit strategies in life. Exit strategies out of relationships that, aren't going so hot. Exit strategies out of jobs that maybe I've had conflict and it's too hard and I don't like my boss, so I'm going to leave. Exit strategies out of missional opportunities where there's something great out there, but the venture is just too hard to keep going. So we got to make sure we have our exit strategy so we can get out if it gets too hard. You know what? It's time for commitment strategies. It is time for us as a church and as followers of Jesus Christ to not say, I want to find the easiest way out, but I want to find the most committed way in. I want to be the hands and feet of Christ. I want to get into that Bible and call a commitment of my life into study and into prayer. I want to commit myself to giving. I'm not going to talk much about tithing in this series this time, but I'm going to tell you tithing is a massive commitment. First fruit giving is a massive commitment. But sometimes we get into it and we simply go, well, I'll try it once or twice. And then all of a sudden a new Camaro comes out and we say, well, now I'm not tithing anymore. I got my exit strategy right here. Burn the ships. Put your hand to the plow and don't look back. As I promise you this, the kingdom is coming. I want my plans to be God's plans. I want to live for him. If needed, I'll die for him. I hope you'll join us and live united. Find your place. Find your place for study. Find your place for worship. Find your place for serving. Find your place for giving. Find your place for witnessing. And in doing so, may all know God's love in Jesus Christ. Would you pray with me this morning?